Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Spill Your Beans. Before we get started today, we just want to let you know that this subject is not a view of our team. We are here to inform yourselves and ourselves and educate ourselves about the options that you have. Today on the panel, we are pro-life, and we'll let Tanpreet here start.
Welcome, Jared. Welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you for being on our set today. So I want to talk about your story. I know you've had a personal experience with choosing abortion, and now you regret that. So can you please tell us more about that?
Sure, absolutely. It was about 15 years ago when I made the terrible mistake to abort my child. I had finished school. I was working downtown Vancouver for a consulting group right on Richards and Robson, and was recently engaged to the love of my life, Angus, my husband now. And we were living together. We had made that decision to live together because we wanted to save money for the wedding. And that's what led to missing my period and finding out that I was pregnant. And it was quite a shock. I grew up in a family that's very traditional. My parents had always, really instilled values in me. And when I heard the news that I was pregnant, I was terrified of what they would think and how would they feel and what would the rest of my family and our friends say. There was so much pressure at that moment.
How old were you at this time?
I was 27 at the time, yeah. And it was about 5 months until we were planning to get married for our wedding date. So all this rush of emotion of fear and not knowing what to do and imagining myself walking down the aisle pregnant, it was a lot to deal with. And so I did what, a lot of women do, and I looked for a women's clinic to try and give me some information on what I could do. Of course, abortion was on my mind because I was so scared. I thought that it was really my only choice. And so I went down and found a clinic.
Did you have any other options?
Was there any family members you could talk to at that time?
Yeah, for me, I think the fear overcame me so much that, if we base our decisions on any emotion, they tend to be not great decisions. And myself, I think I pretty much made the decision within the first 24 hours of finding out that I was pregnant because of that fear. So I remember driving myself down to the clinic in Vancouver, and I was by myself because I didn't want anyone else to know. And I walked into the clinic and I felt like I was in the wrong place. It wasn't warm or inviting by any means. It was cold and stark, and I remember a few other women in the counseling room, and I waited for my name to be called. And when they called, I walked through this door that would completely change my life forever. I was quite early. I was about 7 weeks pregnant at the time, so I had what's called a medical abortion. And so that is basically done in our area, 2 pills. One is called misoprostol, and the other one is called methotrexate. And so they give you the first one in the office, and they tell you to take the second one 12 hours later. So I took that one in the office, and honestly, I can't even tell you how I got home that day. I don't know what it looked like, but the one memory I do have is really late at night, feeling these really painful contractions. I'd never felt that kind of pain before. And I had just taken the other pill before I gone to bed. I couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning, and I actually went to work the next day like nothing was happening because it was a secret and no one knew. And I remember being at work and being in front of a group of professionals and making a presentation, and I felt something happening, and I ran to the bathroom, and that's where it happened. That's where my child was aborted. I was alone in a corporate bathroom on Robson Street in Vancouver when I saw my baby being aborted in a bathroom.
Now, I know Elizabeth mentioned she had a medical abortion. There's 2 types. There's the medical and the surgical, but we'll get into that later. But I couldn't imagine that feeling of, what did you do? Like, you're in the middle of downtown, you're doing a presentation, then what?
Yeah, well, I remember the sound of it hitting the water. I remember flushing the toilet. And I remember stepping out of the stall and washing my face like a girl, checking myself because I had to go back to work like nothing had happened. and nobody knew.
Did you ever decide to open up about it to anyone?
No. It took about 7 years.
You're doing a good job now. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really letting it out now. But little did I know how deeply that would affect me for the rest of my life.
You're wearing a pin right now.
Yeah, I regret my abortion.
Yeah. When did that R word, regret's a very powerful word. When did that kick in? When did you start thinking about that?
As soon as I stepped out of the bathroom stall. And then it was something that I carried with me every day. At first, I didn't know what I would be feeling afterwards. No one had told me, what are some of the feelings I would have, even some of the physical things that might be happening with my body. Felt like, well, this must be how it's supposed to happen. And I've never heard of anyone being upset like this. So maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm the only person feeling like this. And so I didn't talk to anyone. Kept it to myself. It was only my husband and myself who knew, and one other friend. And I wake up still to this day every single morning thinking about it.
Now, as touchy as a topic this is, when you do choose what you did, one, the public points you out. But in your story, even you yourself have taken yourself out of the picture. You've isolated yourself. Wow. And you never shared this.
Not until 6 years later. Yeah.
What made you share your story 6 years later?
I was actually at a conference, this is really tied into my faith journey as well. I was brought up in a Catholic home. A lot of our social engagements and family engagements were around our church and on the weekends and dances and beautiful. But then when I moved away from home, I separated myself from my faith. I thought that's my parents' faith and it's old-fashioned. And so I was living in the world. I would call myself pro-choice at the time. And even after my abortion, I couldn't connect, what was happening in my faith. I couldn't go back because in my heart, what I knew was that I killed my baby. And how could I go back to my church when I believed that I was going to be going to hell?
So you're judging yourself based on what you're thinking you're being judged by your church or your faith.
I wouldn't even say judging myself, but as a mom, as a woman, we are meant to create and carry life. And, if you look at a woman who's, let's say, has had a miscarriage, there's real emotional pain. There is psychological pain. There's physiological pain, but it's recognized. Women understand what's going to be going. The people around them understand the pain that they're going through. It's not the same with abortion.
So now what are you doing? How are you moving forward here? Like, what brought you here, and what are we talking about today then?
Well, that woman, she felt that I was pushing away from her when she talked about prayer. And she asked me when I told her that I'd had an abortion, she said, but you're loved and you're forgiven. And hearing that was like all of a sudden the blinders coming off. It was like, yes, like, why didn't I remember that? Why didn't I believe that? Why did I believe the lie? And so I sought out help after that, some counseling and talking to my pastor at the church. And from that, I knew after I had gone through my counseling that I needed to do something. I needed to make my child's life valuable. I needed to make a difference, not only, with people around me, that the lie of abortion, that it's an eraser, that's not true.
Lie of abortion as an eraser. Meaning of getting rid of the whole memory of everything? Or
well, when I found out I was pregnant, I just didn't want to be pregnant anymore. And the promise that abortion gave me was that it was an eraser, that I just wouldn't be pregnant anymore. And I didn't know about the consequences. So after I did all my counseling and healing, I realized that I wanted to do more. So I actually phoned Jared at Advocate, and I just said I'd like to come and volunteer, and I started volunteering here locally. And before long, I saw a job posting for an assistant, and I just prayed on it. And I decided, you know what, if this is where God wants to lead me, then I'm open to it. And if this is how I can make a difference in my community, either making my daughter's life valuable or helping other women in the community who've gone through abortion and are silent and are suffering, or other women who may be in an unplanned pregnancy and don't have someone to tell them about fetal development and what the abortion procedures look like and what might happen or how it might feel, the option of adoption, or what about parenting? Like, if I could somehow be there in the moment of crisis, then I think that would be a beautiful thing to do for another woman.
No, I like how you said how God chose this to happen. Now, it's something I shared with a friend before we go to commercial here, is just to say that God or life doesn't throw anything at you that you can't handle. You have a choice to either run from it or take it on by the horns and help people out in situations that might be the same as yours. Well, when we come back, we'll continue here again with Elizabeth and Jared. Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth, and I'm the Director for Client Care at Hope for Women Pregnancy Services. What brought me to Hope for Women was my own decision 13 years ago to make the mistake of having an abortion. Between 60 and 70% of women who actually choose abortion don't want abortion. If they had those resources, if they had people there to support them, if I had those resources, if I had a choice, I can only hope that I would have made a different decision and that my life would have went down a different path. Maybe they won't have to make the same choice that I did.
Welcome back to Spill Your Beans. So Elizabeth, I know your story has now inspired you to educate, support, and provide resources for other women. How are you guys doing that?
Well, in Abbotsford, we have Hope for Women Pregnancy Services, which is a program that is run by Advocate Life and Education Services. It's located on George Ferguson, and it's a crisis pregnancy. So women who think that they might be pregnant can come in for free pregnancy tests, options counseling, so that we can really provide them with all of their options. Not only, what pregnancy looks like, how far along that they possibly could be in fetal development, but also what an abortion procedure looks like, the different types, some of the consequences that some women have experienced, as well as information on adoption, because a lot of people don't know about adoption, and the option of parenting. Once a woman has kind of all the information, then she can make an educated decision that's going to be best for her.
Now, do they have to come into your clinic here, or is there any other way they can get a hold of you?
They come into our clinic. Typically, it's a walk-in appointment. So they don't have to make an appointment. They can see a peer counselor usually right away. And some of the great things that we can offer as well is we have a baby boutique. So if the woman decides to carry the baby to term, that would be the first decision, right? Whether to terminate her pregnancy or carry to term, we can provide her with free prenatal vitamins, maternity clothes, and support right through her pregnancy with volunteer doulas. So for a woman who has decided to parent, then we can also help support with baby supplies like diapers and formula. We have a partnership with BCAA and the United Way where we can offer free car seats. So up to 2 years, we can help with those baby items that can help with the cost and some of the unexpected things that might come up.
So it's perfect for anyone who lacks financial stability, right?
Mm-hmm. Speaking of, where do you guys find your support then? How are you able to go out and support these women? If they're needing help?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, Advocate doesn't have any public funding. We don't get any money from the government. We are 100% funded by individuals in the community that really care about what we do. They really care about life in all of its stages and how we advocate for life and how we educate and how we really celebrate life at our organization. So just from people giving us donations from different events that we run throughout the year is how we're able to keep our pregnancy center stocked, how we're able to keep people like Elizabeth hired and there to talk to women when they come in with their crises.
Okay. Now, just speaking of women coming in through the clinic, I did my research, so I know my facts here. But who do you normally see coming through? Are you seeing young people, old people, a certain cultural background? Who's walking through your doors?
Well, typically when you hear crisis pregnancy center, you think of a, late teen, early 20. But really, we've had women from as young as 13 turning 14 to 48 years old. So there's a really wide variety of ages. What that looks like for women, it's so varied. We've had people who are still in school, people who are working. We've had women who are actually married who have had their children, and it's a surprise pregnancy. Their children are kind of almost already raised. And within our community, Abbotsford is such a diverse community that what you see in the community is kind of what's walking through our door.
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that when it comes to crisis pregnancies, it doesn't just affect one type of woman.
It's to all.
Any woman at any age, of any culture, of any race and background can have an unplanned pregnancy and can be in that, oh my goodness, what do I do?
Here's a strange question. I never thought of this before. So say somebody decides not to terminate an abortion, but at the same time, they're not able to keep or take care of their baby. Is there options provided for them?
Well, and absolutely, one of the options, of course, is what's the reason that they feel they can't support the baby? Is it a financial? Is it that they don't have, support, emotional support, family support? Those are things that we can help with. But there is, of course, the option of adoption. And I think we've been really blessed to see 3 adoptions happen at Hope for Women. So we've seen what that looks like. We've seen the women and been there when they've tried to decide what's going to be best for them. We've been able to provide them with good adoption stories. How is adoption done in Canada? Because there's a lot of misinformation about what adoption looks like. So I think having the correct information is so important when you're making that decision.
What are the certain kinds of misinformation have you heard from other women?
Yeah, I think adoption can be very, very scary for women. And so they just have this idea that their kid is going to end up in the foster system and they're going to be, have this horrible life, or I'm going to be a horrible person because I'm giving up my child. So we don't even use the term giving up your child. You're placing your child for adoption. And most adoptions, almost all of them in Canada, are open adoptions. So it's not as if you're saying goodbye to your child and never seeing your child again. You can continue to have a relationship with your child going forward. And we've had stories of women who were actually sitting in an abortion clinic, and because of one of our displays that we had out there, they were thinking about that and they just decided that they couldn't go through with it, walked out of that abortion clinic, realized they still weren't in a position to parent, and chose the option of adoption. And their little girl's about 7 today, and she's kind of like a big sister to, she's not the mom, but this child knows that she has this adoptive family that loves her, and she still has her birth mom in the picture. So an open adoption is a really beautiful thing for kids, and a lot of women just don't know that. They think they're just giving away their child. They think for some reason their child might not have a great life, and so we can share those great adoptive stories that are out there.
Maybe scared of judgment of what their child might think of them. Yeah, but if you're there from day one and supporting whoever's taking care of, that's a great story. So 3 here in Abbotsford.
3, and women can identify with the loss of adoption, that they have the baby, that they've experienced the bonding through pregnancy and afterbirth, but they don't recognize the pain of loss after abortion. So where a woman's like, I could never give my baby away, they still haven't pieced together that really there are some consequences emotionally and physically with choosing abortion.
Yeah, when you choose adoption, your baby isn't actually gone. But when you choose abortion, your baby is gone. And so it's just helping to women to realize that. And sometimes they just don't think about that, and they need to be able to have somebody to talk to and to really process, what would I feel like? Some women, maybe they're going to feel great about it, and other women, maybe they are going to feel really bad about it. But just having a soft place to land at a crisis pregnancy center can make all the difference.
So speaking of gone, people have that conception of when is a child actually born? So when is that? Is it after they come out of the womb? Is it right when? Is it conception? When is it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and there's all sorts of people who will argue back and forth, and when is it actually alive? And we know from science that at conception you have a living human entity. Yeah, it's an embryo, it turns into a fetus, And some people will just say, oh, it's just an embryo or it's just a fetus. Well, those are just terminologies. When you're born, you're an infant, and then you become a toddler, and then you become an adolescent. Those are just stages in life. So at what point do you draw a line in the sand and say, okay, now you're valuable and you should be protected? Our message is that everyone is valuable.
Well, you got to ask such tough questions. That's a good one.
No, you know what? I was actually wondering that myself because I had no idea.
No.
I wasn't sure.
Here's a strange one. Now, say somebody walks in, life is what we're talking about, and for whatever information you can provide, the choice they've made is still about terminating the pregnancy. Do you help guide them, or you just see you later?
Well, right from the beginning, when a client walks in, she's given a form that talks about all of our services. And one of the things there, it says that we're not a medical facility, that we neither perform abortions or refer for them. So when I'm in a room with a client, she has decided that abortion is her best decision. What I want to make sure is that she's taken care of medically. So what we do is we will refer her back to her doctor because he knows her medical history. There's a lot that the doctor should look at, but depending on where he's going to refer her, what type of abortion, whatever it may be. So I want to know that she's safe with a professional medical person who knows her history. The other thing I really try and leave them with is that, there isn't any judgment, that this is their decision, and that can I keep in touch with them? Can I follow up with them afterwards, for whatever they need? Because I know that I didn't have that. So if a woman after her procedure needs some chicken soup, if she needs someone to pick up groceries for her, then I want them to know that they can call us and that we'll do whatever it takes. The other thing that we are able to offer is post-abortion counseling. So after abortion care and counseling, which is, for me, was invaluable. It was what turned me around and made me feel really whole again. And a woman, as we know in Canada, here in British Columbia, abortion is covered by our BC medical system. Yet, if a woman is having some needs afterwards and needs to talk to someone, she's going to have to pay out of pocket for counseling. And that can run anywhere between $100 and $160 an hour. But we're there to offer it for free.
Yeah, we don't provide professional counseling, but we have people, amazing women like Elizabeth, that they can talk to, who can listen to them, and often that's just what they need.
I think with somebody that's gone and experienced something is more professional than somebody who's read it in a book. And
Yeah, I think so too.
Actually, when we had gone to commercial, we were talking about that and how you had to experience that on your own. I don't believe that was reality. I'm sorry you had to go through with that. That's unreal. But I was going to get to some facts and figures here that I'd pulled out, but why don't we do that kind of stuff when we get back from break?
Yeah, let's do
All right, we'll be right back, you guys. Welcome back, folks. Just before we went to commercial, we were talking about bringing up some facts. Well, I'm going to share one here with you, and I'm sure you can relate to it. So 1 in 10 by the age of 20, 1 in 4 by the age of 30, and 3 out of 10, so 30% of women by the age of 45 have terminated at some point.
Yeah, and it's not just one abortion. Some of these women have had more than one, multiple abortions.
What kind of a situation were we talking about here?
Well, a lot of women who choose abortion, there are some definite consequences to it. There's an increase in suicide, an increase in alcohol, drug abuse. And one of the consequences is many women feel the need to have a make-up pregnancy, let's say, where they feel a lot of regret, a lot of pain about aborting their first child. They end up getting pregnant, but yet the circumstances haven't changed at all, and they end up choosing abortion a second time.
And I know you were talking about the experience you had. What were some of the side effects that you dealt with after your abortion?
Oh, a huge one was just pushing away from my faith. Like, I didn't want to hear about God. I didn't want to hear about prayer because I felt like I was lost. Another one was that I was really traumatized whenever I saw baby commercials, like a diaper commercial, friends who were pregnant. To this day, I hate going to the walk-in clinic because it reminds me of The Office. Going to the dentist is really scary for me because of the sights, the sounds, the smells. And for me, I mean, the reason I chose to abort was fear about telling my parents and what they were going to say. I never ever imagined how hard it was going to be to tell them that I'd had an abortion. And it was even harder to tell my children that they were missing a sibling.
And I think fear is like probably the number one factor that leads us to choosing abortion and not being able to tell or even gain support or just knowledge about what you're going to experience during and after.
And you provide support after the fact. Do other people provide that as well?
Well, there's not a lot of support after abortion unless it's provided by, let's say, a faith-based group or a pro-life group. The only other place that I've heard of is the abortion provider themselves. But speaking personally, that's the last place I would want to go for after abortion care.
Now, I know we've talked about women and how they're involved in this whole process, but what about men in this story? You know, like, are they involved? Do you have any stories about that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's often marketed as a women's issue, but for every single woman who chooses abortion, and there's about 100,000 women every year in our country who make that decision to have an abortion. And every single time there is a man that is somehow involved. Now, oftentimes that man is pressuring her to have the abortion. She doesn't really want it, but she loves this guy or thinks she loves this guy. And he's saying, well, you know, if you don't have the abortion, I'm going to leave you. And so she makes the decision to have the abortion, and oftentimes he leaves anyways. But you also have the opposite side of the story where you have men who desperately want to be fathers. I have 3 kids myself, and every time my wife was pregnant, I knew that wasn't just her body, that was also my child there. And anyone who's a dad can recognize and can resonate with that, seeing your child on an ultrasound machine. And we've had dads telling that story where they were planning to have a child and something went wrong, they broke up, she made a different decision, and he had no say in that. So we've had guys come to us and just say, I don't know what to do. We decided we were going to have this baby. It's my baby. I'm excited to have this. You can imagine this anticipation of being a dad and knowing that next Saturday she's going for an appointment to have an abortion, and there's nothing you can do about it. And there is nothing that you can do about it. At the end of the day, it's her choice. You can't physically stop her from doing it. But there's a real pain of a loss of fatherhood that thousands and thousands of men in our country feel, and it often goes unspoken.
Yeah, so it's a loss for both.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be.
Folks, I think we've gone over in time here, and I see my producer yelling at me.
Yep.
So we're going to continue this very conversation next week, part 2, with Jared and Elizabeth on Life.
Stay tuned.
Location and studio provided by Sip Chai Cafe. Located in West Abbotsford, your locally owned and operated cafe.